This line introduces the topic. We'll be exploring how the scikit-learn function set_config works. It's all about understanding its role in configuring scikit-learn's behavior. This tells us the format of the quiz. We'll be presented with a multiple-choice question about set_config. This is the actual question. We need to carefully read each statement and determine which ones correctly explain what set_config does in scikit-learn. Think about its effect on the overall environment and any settings it changes. This statement claims that set_config makes permanent changes. Let's think if that's correct. Does it impact code permanently, or only for the current session? This option suggests that set_config can adjust how scikit-learn behaves. For example, perhaps it manages how many decimal places are displayed in model outputs. This option proposes that set_config is local in its effect, only influencing the section of code where it is used. This is the opposite of statement A. Consider the potential scope of changes. This statement suggests a specific use of set_config. It implies that set_config can be used to control the amount of information printed to help debug a model. Here is where we evaluate each option A, B, C, and D based on the given details. Before diving into the choices, it's crucial to thoroughly understand the main question about the Sklearn.set_config function. Specific configuration options. This row points to the fact that setconfig in scikit-learn doesn't just handle one thing. It offers various customization options. Think of it like a toolbox with many tools. Each tool, or configuration option, lets you tweak scikit-learn's behavior in a specific way. This section introduces the idea that setconfig is versatile. It's not limited to a single setting. What other settings might it control? Print_precision, print_changed, etc. Here, we see examples of setconfig's specific configuration options. printprection lets you control how many decimal places scikit-learn displays numbers. printchanged determines whether scikit-learn tells you when a model's internal parameters change, helpful for debugging. The etc. implies there are more options available than just these two. This is not an exhaustive list. Can you think of why you'd want to control these settings? What other useful settings do you think might exist? This is a multiple-choice question designed to assess understanding of the Sklearn.set_config function in the scikit-learn library. The question presents 4 statements about the function's behavior and asks you to identify the accurate ones. Let's dive in and see what we can figure out. This question directly sets the stage, presenting the core concept. Understanding how Sklearn.set_config works within a scikit-learn machine learning workflow. The select all that apply format indicates that multiple options might be correct, requiring careful consideration of each statement. This statement explores whether Sklearn.set_config creates permanent, global changes across the entire Python session. Let's consider if the configurations remain even after the session ends. Here, the focus shifts to the control Sklearn.set_config offers over scikit-learn's functionality. Think about the level of detail you want in the output. This option specifically mentions controlling print precision. This statement explores a specific use case of Sklearn.set_config using the print_changed option to enhance debugging by showing parameter changes within the model. Imagine the ease of debugging with this feature. This line introduces the topic of the quiz. Understanding the Sklearn.set_config function in the scikit-learn library. It sets the stage for the multiple-choice questions that follow. Scikit-learn is a popular Python library for machine learning. Set_config is a function within this library that allows us to adjust how scikit-learn behaves. Think of it like changing settings in a software program. This line indicates that the next section will present a multiple-choice question designed to test the understanding of the Sklearn.set_config function. We are going to be presented with a problem to solve. This line poses the core question of the quiz. It asks you to identify which statements correctly describe what sklearn.set_config does and how it affects the scikit-learn workflow. The word workflow refers to the steps involved in using scikit-learn to build and use machine learning models. Pay close attention to each statement to figure out whether they're accurate. Here's the first multiple choice option. This statement claims that set_config makes permanent, global changes. Let's see if that's correct. This option suggests that set_config lets you adjust things like how many decimal places are shown when scikit-learn prints model details. A very practical aspect to consider. This option states the opposite of option A, saying that changes made by set_config are only local. This option describes a specific use of set_config to help with debugging, finding and fixing errors in code, setting print_changed to true will make scikit-learn give more output, showing changes to model parameters, making debugging easier. This line introduces the topic of the quiz, understanding how scikit-learn's configuration settings work. It specifically mentions the function sklearn.set_config which is the focus of the quiz questions. This line indicates that the following section presents a multiple-choice quiz about sklearn.set_config. The questions will test your understanding of this function's behavior. This is the actual question of the quiz. You need to choose from the options given below, assessing which accurately describe how sklearn.set_config works within a scikit-learn project. Option A describes that set_config permanently changes scikit-learn's overall settings for the current Python session, affecting everything that runs afterward. Option B explains that set_config lets you manage how scikit-learn behaves, like setting the number of decimal places shown in model output. Option C suggests that set_config only changes the settings within the specific piece of code where it's used, not globally across the entire session. Option D describes a specific use, using set_config, print_changed. True, makes scikit-learn show messages every time a model setting changes. This is extremely helpful for fixing code errors. This line indicates that a key aspect to understand is how the set_config function affects the entire Python session as opposed to just a small part of it. The configuration applies globally unless specified otherwise. This line introduces the topic of the quiz, understanding the scikit-learn library's configuration function, sklearn.set_config. Scikit-learn is a popular Python library for machine learning. Think of sklearn.set_config as the control panel for how scikit-learn behaves. It lets you tweak various settings. This line indicates that the following question will be a multiple-choice question, meaning you'll need to choose one or more options from the list provided. Get ready to put your scikit-learn knowledge to the test. This is the core question of the quiz. It asks you to identify which statements accurately describe the function and effect of sklearn.set_config within a typical scikit-learn workflow. The instruction, select all that apply, indicates that multiple answers might be correct. Option A suggests that changes made using set_config are permanent and affect the entire Python session. Let's see if this is true. Option B states that set_config lets you adjust how scikit-learn behaves, for example, by changing the number of decimal places displayed in model output. This sounds plausible. Option C claims that the effect of set_config is limited to the specific part of the code where it's used. Let's consider whether this is consistent with how configuration typically works. Option D describes a specific use of set_config setting print_changed to true for debugging purposes. This means scikit-learn will output messages whenever model parameters change. Is this a valid use case for set_config? This is a simple label indicating that the preceding lines list the answer options for the multiple choice question.